Dark chosen ones, why God sent you into darkness instead of keeping you pure. Have you ever wondered why your life didn't stay clean, safe, or easy? Why you weren't born into a gentle path of light and clarity, surrounded by love and support, growing up in purity without ever being touched by pain, betrayal, or confusion? Why, instead, it feels like you were thrown into chaos, into trauma, rejection, addiction, shame, depression, rage, or silence? Why, if there is a God, a divine intelligence, a higher power, would that force allow you to be marked by darkness? You're not alone in asking this. I've asked it. So have millions of others who walk around feeling like outcasts, like cursed souls in a world that worships perfection and pretends pain doesn't exist. But here's the truth no one told you: you were never cursed. You were chosen to walk a path most fear. And God didn't keep you pure because purity isn't power, transmutation is. We don't become who we're meant to be by avoiding the dark. We become who we are by going through it. God didn't send you into darkness as punishment. God sent you into darkness because He trusted you with it. Let that sink in. The moment your life began to unravel, the moment you were betrayed, hurt, abandoned, misunderstood, or thrown into pain, it wasn't a detour. It was the beginning of your initiation. And not everyone gets that call. Only the ones who are strong enough to hold both heaven and hell in the same breath. The ones who can walk into the abyss and come back not with fear, but with fire.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
I used to think I was broken, that something was wrong with me, that I was too angry, too damaged, too intense to ever be spiritual. I would look at others who radiated peace and feel like I didn't belong. I tried to force myself into the light, to meditate away my demons, to pretend I wasn't hurting. But the more I denied my darkness, the more it grew. Until one day I stopped running. I sat with it. I asked it to speak. And it did. It told me things that no teacher, no book, no guru ever had the courage to say. It told me I wasn't in the dark because I was lost. I was in the dark because I was being forged. That I wasn't off my path was the path. Have you ever felt like life was trying to kill something inside you, but not you, just the version of you that no longer fits? That's because the darkness doesn't arrive to destroy you. It arrives to strip you of everything that's not real. The fake smiles, the people-pleasing, the masks you wear to be loved. God doesn't want your performance. God wants your truth. And the only way to find it is to go into the parts of yourself you were taught to hide. The anger, the lust, the envy, the despair, the hunger for more. You were told these were sins. But what if they're not? What if they're signals? What if your shadows are invitations? You see, every wound you carry is a doorway. Every scar is a symbol. Every breakdown is a message that your soul is trying to evolve, but your ego is holding on too tightly. And God knows this. That's why He lets you fall. Because in the fall, you stop pretending. You hit the ground and your illusions shatter. And in that wreckage, if you're brave enough to look, you find something sacred. Yourself. Not the self you show the world, the real you. The one that never needed to be pure, just whole. We live in a culture that worships light, but forgets that the seed is planted in darkness, that the butterfly begins in a cocoon, that the phoenix only rises after it burns. So why would we assume spiritual growth means avoiding darkness? That's not how it works. Real spiritual power doesn't come from staying clean, it comes from getting dirty and coming back golden. You were sent into darkness because there's something in you that's meant to alchemize it, to feel things most people are too numb to feel, to face truths most people are too afraid to see, to carry wisdom most people don't even know exists. And that's why you've suffered, not because God hates you, but because God is training you. And if you're honest, there's a part of you that already knows this. That's why you've survived what should have destroyed you. That's why you keep rising, even when it makes no sense. That's why you've always felt different. Because you are. You're not here to fit in. You're here to awaken. You're not here to be saved. You're here to remember that you were never lost. So let me ask you something. What if your pain is not your punishment, but your portal? What if every time you've been pushed into darkness, it was actually a doorway to your next level of power? What if God didn't keep you pure because He knew you were strong enough to purify yourself? And what if the reason you've been through hell is because heaven is being built inside you? You don't find the light by denying the dark. You find the light by going through the dark, by becoming the kind of being who can hold both, who can walk through fire and not lose their heart, who can bleed and still bless. That's what a dark chosen one is. Not someone who avoids shadow, but someone who masters it. Not someone who is untouched by life, but someone who is transformed by it. You were sent into darkness not because you were weak, but because you were ready. Ready to wake up. Ready to deconstruct the lies. Ready to rise, not as a pure soul, but as a powerful one. And that's what's happening now. You're remembering. You're rising. You're reconnecting with the part of you that was never afraid of the dark, only conditioned to be. And when that part fully awakens, nothing can stop you, not even God, because at that point you're walking with Him. The divine trap, why your fall, was the first step toward your flight. You probably never realized it, but you were ambushed by destiny. Not the smooth, polished kind of destiny that comes with applause and bright lights, but the kind that hits you like a storm in the middle of the night. The kind that wrecks everything you thought you were and leaves you staring at the ruins, wondering why God let it happen. And yet, if you look closely, if you feel past the pain and into the silence beneath it, you'll start to sense something intelligent hidden in the chaos. A pattern. A purpose. A divine trap. One that was never meant to destroy you but to wake you up. Because your fall wasn't an accident. It was architecture. Designed not to break you, but to disarm your illusions so you could finally meet your real self. You see, the fall is a sacred part of the flight. Every mystic, every prophet, every true spiritual warrior has gone through it. The descent, the collapse, the exile, the betrayal, not because they were bad, but because they were marked. Because the soul doesn't become strong by staying safe. It becomes strong by being stripped of comfort, of false identity, of everything that kept you asleep. And so God, in divine precision, lets it all come undone. He lets you lose what you thought you needed. He lets people leave. He lets plans fail. He lets the light go out not because He's cruel, but because He knows what's waiting for you in the dark. You. Most people don't realize this, but your lowest point wasn't the end, it was the invitation. The moment when life stopped asking you to pretend. The moment when the mask cracked and you were finally raw enough to hear something deeper than your thoughts. That whisper that says, this isn't death, this is rebirth. But rebirth doesn't feel like awakening at first. It feels like dying. Like everything is being taken from you, your identity, your relationships, your direction. And that's the divine trap. The illusion of loss is actually the beginning of alignment. You are not being punished. You are being emptied so something real can fill you. So many of us try to climb back to who we were before the fall. We fight to reclaim the old life, the old goals, the old dreams. But what if you were never meant to go back? What if you're not meant to be restored but reinvented? That's the secret God hides in the fall. He lets you lose the life you built so you can finally live the life you were born for. But here's the twist: He doesn't tell you that's what He's doing. He lets you think it's over. He lets you scream, curse, cry. He lets you hate him because he's not looking for your obedience. He's looking for your truth. And truth only shows up when everything else is gone. I know this path is lonely. I know it's brutal. But you weren't sent here to be comfortable. You were sent here to wake others up. And how could you ever do that if you hadn't been broken yourself? How could you guide others through the fire if you'd never burned? That's why your pain matters. It's not random. It's not meaningless. It's the very forge where your power is being shaped. The fall was never the failure. It was the furnace. So ask yourself, what if the darkness you're in right now isn't a prison, but a cocoon? What if the collapse you're experiencing is the cracking of the shell that was too small for who you're becoming? What if, instead of asking God, why me, you began asking, what power is being born in me right now? That single shift in perception could change everything. Because when you stop seeing the fall as punishment and start seeing it as preparation, you begin to rise not in ego but in essence. You start remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. You start reclaiming the pieces of yourself you buried to survive. You start stepping into rooms with a different kind of power, not loud, not aggressive, but undeniable. Because once you've survived the fall, once you've walked through fire and found your soul still intact, you become unshakable. Not perfect, not pure, but real. And realness is magnetic. Realness is contagious. Realness is what makes people stare at you and wonder, how did they survive that? And how are they still shining? The answer is simple. You were never meant to avoid the fall. You were meant to rise through it. You were never meant to stay untouched. You were meant to be transformed. And that's what makes you one of the dark chosen ones. Not that you stayed in the light, but that you found the light within the dark, and now carry it like a flame in your chest, lighting the way for others who are still lost. The fire in your veins, how pain becomes power, and power becomes purpose. There comes a moment after the fall, after the silence, after the darkness has swallowed you whole, when something strange begins to happen. You start to feel something stir inside your chest. It's not comfort. It's not peace. It's not even clarity. It's heat, a slow-burning, almost imperceptible fire that wasn't there before. You don't know how it got there, only that it's real. It pulses beneath your ribs, quietly at first, but then louder. It doesn't shout, but it insists. It says you're not done. And if you listen closely enough, it says something even stranger. You were never broken. You were being built. That's how pain becomes power through presence, not by escaping it, numbing it, or pretending it didn't happen, but by owning it, holding it, letting it crush you just enough to reveal the core of who you are. Because pain, when honored, becomes fuel. It becomes a sacred fire that does not burn you, it brands you. It marks you with knowing, with depth, with the kind of wisdom that no book, no teacher, no religion can offer, only experience. And that wisdom doesn't come with a halo, it comes with scars. Most people run from pain. We're taught it's a sign something's gone wrong. But what if it's the opposite? What if pain is not dysfunction but activation? What if it's the moment your soul begins to stretch beyond the limits of your old self? That's why it hurts, because something larger is trying to emerge. And if you let it, if you stop resisting and instead lean into the fire, something alchemical happens. The pain doesn't go away, but it changes shape. It transforms into a sharpness, a clarity, a force. You begin to see through illusions. You begin to hear what others ignore. You begin to sense the invisible, because your pain trained you to tune in. This is how power is born, not through conquest, but through capacity. The capacity to feel what others run from. The capacity to sit in discomfort without needing to escape. The capacity to carry rage, grief, love, hope, and loss all at once and not collapse. That's real power. The kind that doesn't need to be loud to be known. The kind that walks into a room and changes the air without saying a word. You've seen it before. In the eyes of someone who's been through hell and didn't just survive but glowed afterward. That glow isn't about light, it's about fire. But fire without direction is just destruction. That's why the next evolution of your power is purpose. Pain refines you, power awakens you, but purpose aims you. And this is where many get stuck. They awaken their power but don't know what to do with it. They become strong but directionless. And so they burn people. They burn themselves. They lash out. Or worse, they shrink back into the shadows, afraid of their own strength. But you're not built for that. You didn't endure all this just to survive. You're here to create, to build, to serve not in submission but in sacred rebellion. Your purpose isn't something you find. It's something you remember. It was always encoded in your soul, but it had to be unlocked through experience. Every heartbreak, every betrayal, every loss that was the key turning. Now, you get to choose how to use it. Will you use your story to silence yourself or to speak truth that liberates others? Will you use your scars as proof of your pain or as symbols of your power? Will you carry your darkness as a burden or will you wield it like a sword? Purpose is not a job title. It's not a role. It's a frequency. It's the vibration you emit when you stop hiding who you are. When you stop apologizing for the fire in your veins. When you stop pretending you're not as powerful as you know you are. And here's the wildest part, your purpose might not make sense to anyone else. It might look like chaos from the outside. It might be messy, non-linear, misunderstood, but it will feel true. And that's how you'll know it's real. Not because it's easy, but because it burns clean. So, let me ask you a question. And answer it not with your mind, but with your body. What is the pain you've survived preparing you to do? Not what the world expects of you, not what your family approves of, but what your soul knows is yours to carry. What truth is ready to be spoken through your voice? What world is waiting to be built through your hands? That's where your purpose lies, not in the heavens, not in the textbooks, but in your story. Your raw, unfiltered, unpolished story. That's the temple. That's where God lives now in you. The fire in your veins isn't rage. It's remembrance. It's the echo of the divine spark you were born with, reignited by your descent into the dark. And now that it's burning, the question is no longer, will I survive? The question is, what will I set on fire with this new power? What will I create, destroy, rebuild, or awaken not just in the world but in every soul I touch? Because you are no longer just a survivor. You are an initiator, a catalyst, a living flame. And your purpose, it's not something you do, it's something you are. Walking between worlds, how the dark chosen ones become the bridge between heaven and hell. There comes a point in the journey when you stop asking, why did this happen to me? And begin to ask, who am I becoming because of it? This is the moment when the dark chosen one stops running, stops resisting, and begins to embody. You realize that you are no longer just someone healing from the past or someone trying to reach the light. You are something else entirely now, a bridge between worlds, between the sacred and the profane, between heaven and hell, between spirit and flesh, between the silence of the soul and the screams of the human condition. And that bridge, it's you, your body, your voice, your story, your presence. You see, people talk about ascension, about escaping the world, transcending suffering, reaching some higher plane. But the dark chosen ones, we're not here to escape, we're here to integrate, to walk into the deepest shadows, not to become lost in them, but to retrieve power from them and bring it back to the world. That's why we were sent into darkness, not to die there, but to rise with the medicine. And that medicine isn't always pretty. Sometimes it looks like truth that cuts. Sometimes it looks like love that doesn't coddle. Sometimes it looks like clarity that shatters illusions people have clung to their entire lives. But that's the role now. You are not here to fit in. You are here to disrupt and heal simultaneously. The reason it had to be you is because you can hold paradox. You've been through enough to understand that light isn't always good, and darkness isn't always evil. You've felt the lies that hide in the name of love, and the strange, raw liberation that sometimes comes from what the world calls sin. You've learned not to judge by appearances, but by frequency. You've learned to feel what's real, even when it's uncomfortable. That's your gift now. You're a translator between dimensions, a soul fluent in both agony and ecstasy, a human who remembers divinity, and a divine spark that chose to be human anyway. You walk between worlds every time you speak truth in a world built on silence. Every time you offer your scars as a map for someone else's healing. Every time you show up, not as a perfect guru, but as a living paradox, flawed, powerful, soft, fierce, sacred, and deeply, deeply real. That's what people need now. Not perfection, not dogma, not more rules. They need to see what it looks like when someone has walked through fire and still chooses to love, still chooses to create, still chooses to stay. Because the real power of a dark chosen one isn't in escaping the world, it's in rebuilding it. Rebuilding it through presence, through creativity, through fearless compassion, through unapologetic truth, through being the kind of person who can sit with addicts, mystics, atheists, priests, broken hearts, and wild souls and see all of them as sacred. That's what makes you different. You don't divide, you unify, you don't condemn. You understand, you don't preach, you embody. So what now? Now you live it, not as a performance, not as a brand, but as a quiet, relentless flame that never goes out. You show up in every moment as the bridge. You listen deeper. You speak clearer. You move with purpose. You remember who you are even when others forget. You carry heaven in your chest and hell in your bones, and somehow you make them dance. Not because you were taught to, but because you were born for it. You are the one who can walk through both fire and light and not be consumed by either. You are the one who was sent into darkness not to be lost, but to lead others out. And now that you've made it through, the only question that remains is, what world will you build with the power you've become?